Copenhagen is an amazing city, but it's also quite expensive and perhaps a little confusing if you don't know what you're doing. So this video right here is my full Copenhagen travel guide. And first I'll show you some of my favorite places to visit in Copenhagen as a local. Then I'll give you all the tips on how to save a bit of money here in Copenhagen and some other great little tips like how much should you tip at a restaurant? And finally, I'll show you just how much my partner and I spent living in Copenhagen. So you can get a sense of the budget and the living expenses if you are planning perhaps a longer trips or even on moving here. So let's get started. When you visit a new place like Copenhagen, there's this balance of wanting to see all the famous tourist attractions, but also finding the hidden gems and trying to see the city a bit like a local. So I think the best of both worlds is to ask a local friend, if you had to show someone around the city for a few days, where would you take them? And I'm gonna be that friend for you. My name is Adam and I like to travel and make videos. And today I'm gonna show you how to travel Copenhagen like a local. Copenhagen is the capital of Denmark and is home to around 650,000 people. And the first travel tip I'll give you today is about when you should visit. If you can, aim for May through September. Copenhagen is just a completely different city during the warmer months, and I'll be honest, the city can be a bit sad, grey and cold the rest of the year. But I also think that's part of what makes those few warm months extra special here, as we've been in the cold darkness for so many months. Now, December can also be quite nice though if you're looking for a beautiful Christmas vibe. Pretty much everyone here speaks great English and you can pay with your credit card everywhere. No real need to take out any cash. Now, you should probably rent a bicycle. It's the way to get around in Copenhagen. I mean, I think I'm like, 28 and I have never had a car. I just don't need it. It's really easy to get around the city, just walking or biking or using public transportation. I mean, in general, public transportation here is fantastic. And if you want to save a little bit of money on accommodation, you can just stay a little bit outside the city, near a train station, and then you can quickly and easily get to the city. So we want to do things a bit like the locals do, so renting a bike it is, but just make sure you read up on the rules and how to actually drive a bike here in Copenhagen, because us locals, we hate when tourists stop in the middle of the street because they see something amazing or just get lost. So the first place we'll bike today is located in Frederiksberg, and Frederiksberg is actually its own municipality within the city of Copenhagen. But we'll start here because this is where I live, but it's also just such a nice area and I don't think that too many tourists actually come here, as there are not really that many of the well-known tourist attractions here. So first we'll head to Frederiksberg Garden. A lot of locals, including myself, come here for a walk, a run or just to sit and hang out with friends. It's also located right next to the zoo, and from inside the gardens you can actually get a completely free view of the elephants. Here in the garden is also this beautiful castle, the Frederiksberg Castle, which used to be a summer residence for the royal family, but now it is a school for officers in the Danish army. Exiting the gardens on the east side, our next stop is to head down Frederiksberg Allé, which is basically a large avenue that connects the gardens and the castle to the city center of Copenhagen. This is probably my favorite street in all of Copenhagen. It gives some real Parisian vibes. And a little fun fact about this road or avenue is that when it was built about 300 years ago, it was built to connect Copenhagen to the king's new summer residence, the Frederiksberg Castle that we just visited. And for many years, the whole road was locked off, so only the king and his court could use it, which I find kind of funny. Now it's a pretty expensive residential area. There's also a bunch of theaters here and quite a few restaurants. Now, finding a place around here to have lunch could be a pretty great idea. I'll instead show you what you should be ordering for lunch here in Copenhagen. Well, in Denmark in general. But instead of going to a restaurant and actually ordering it myself, I will now go home and make it myself. Alright, so I've made it back home, and the dish that I recommend you try while here in Denmark is called smørrebrød. It's basically rye bread with stuff on top. Let me explain. So this is actually what I have been eating for lunch pretty much my entire life. Now, I don't suggest that you go and make smørrebrød yourself at your hotel or wherever you're staying. But at least you'll get an idea of what it is. And again, how the locals do it. So we're basically just putting on some kind of butter here, fake cheese, some salami. Now with the salami, you'll want to put remoulade. And what I suggest that you do is to go out and find a great smørrebrøds restaurant. So basically a restaurant that specializes in making this. Then it'll look a bit more like this, and it'll be a lot more delicious. What I got here is the budget version. So I'll enjoy my lunch, and after that we'll head towards the city center. I'll park the bike here at Rådhuspladsen, the City Hall Square, as it's a pretty centrally located spot from where we can easily reach all the other attractions. And well, from here, we'll just start walking. Now, the first thing to do here is really just to wander the streets and get a little bit lost and check out all the beautiful buildings and great shops. When you get lost down the gorgeous streets and alleyways, you might come across a place like this, one of Copenhagen's oldest stores, a tea shop which opened all the way back in 1835. When we're done window shopping, it's time to head over to Gammel Strand to get our first glimpse of the Copenhagen canals. There's always a lot going on here, and if you look below the water, you might be able to spot the underwater statue Agnete and the Merman. On the opposite side of the canal, you can't help but notice the enormous Christiansborg Palace. It was home to the royal family for 800 years, but now it houses the Danish Parliament. You can buy a ticket and tour around the old rooms and get a real sense of the royal history. Easy to miss, but worth a visit, is Bibliotekshaven, which sits quietly just around the corner from Christiansborg Palace. It's a beautiful and calm garden where you can catch your breath after all the walking we've already been doing. And if you have your bicycle, it's really easy to get between all of these locations here. And the same with public transportation, you can easily get to places that are very close by. And if you want to get in your 10,000 steps, it's also very possible to just walk between all of these places here. No trip to Copenhagen would be complete without a visit to the picturesque Nyhavn. The colorful buildings date all the way back to around the 1680s, when the harbor was busy with sailors and traders. Now it's probably Copenhagen's biggest tourist magnet, and it's a great place to grab something to eat, or if you want to do like the locals, get a sandwich and a beer and enjoy the scenery sitting by the canal. If neither of those lunch options are for you, I might have what you need. Walk towards the end of Nyhavn on the right side of the canal and cross the bridge you see here. Once across, you'll get to this little area which is called Broens Gadekøkken, and it's basically a small selection of great street food and drinks. Next, we'll head over to Ophelia Plads, which is another great place to just chill out with a drink and relax, and it offers a great view of the Royal Danish Opera House. If we keep walking just a few minutes down by the water, we'll make it to Amalienborg Palace, which is the current home to the Danish royal family. One of the cool things to see here is the changing of the royal guard, which happens every day at around 11:30 or 12 a.m. Just behind Amalienborg sits the gorgeous Marmorkirken, the marble church. It's a beautiful church, and you can freely enter and see the just as beautiful insides. Now from here, we are not that far away from the Little Mermaid, which, to be honest, I think is quite underwhelming. But since it's really close, we might just have a look. And what is perhaps the most enjoyable is to watch all these other tourists trying to get as close as possible to this tiny statue. But it is worth coming out this way, because just around the corner from the Little Mermaid, we can head into Castellet, or the Citadel. It's an old fortress that was a part of Copenhagen's defenses, and now it houses military personnel and is, well, freely open to the public to enjoy the scenery and walk the banks. Not far from Castellet, we'll find Nyboder. These rows of old yellow houses are pretty beautiful, and they were constructed to house the Danish Navy and Army, and well, still to this day do just that. Our next stop is Kongens Have, the King's Garden, the oldest royal gardens in Denmark. Laid out in the 1600s, it's now a pretty popular place for a picnic. But we are here to check out Rosenborg Castle, which sits right beside it. You can enter the castle, which has a beautiful museum and is also home to the Danish crown jewels. Right, I am getting hungry again, and this time we can go over and check out Torvehallerne. The best way I can describe this place is fancy street food, but you can also buy a lot of high quality foods and ingredients if you're looking to do a little cooking yourself. Not too far from here is the very creatively named The Lakes. They have a pretty interesting history with being basically a moat around the city of Copenhagen, and they have also been used as water reservoirs for drinking water. Now though, it's a place where people come to have a walk or a run or just to hang out, and it's a lovely place to sit and just people watch. If you are in Copenhagen and the weather is nice, go and hang out by the canals. This particular spot is called Kalvebod Bølge, and it always has a great vibe. Another activity which is practically a must-do in Copenhagen is touring the canals by boat. These large canal boats is a popular way to do it, but I recommend having a look at these smaller boats that you can drive yourself. GoBoat is a popular company to go with, or if you want the private tour, but with a captain, you can check out Hey Captain. Of course, we can't forget about Tivoli, the old amusement park in the middle of Copenhagen. Very much worth a visit if you have the time, as you can easily spend a whole day here. It can also really add up cost-wise, as the entrance alone is $22, and if you want a ride pass, that'll be around $38 on top of that. Expensive, but a really great experience. A visit to the part of Copenhagen called Christianshavn is also very much recommended. It almost has that same feeling as Nyhavn with the old colorful buildings, but it's a lot less busy. When you're near, you'll likely notice the beautiful spire that sits on top of the Church of Our Savior. It's really unique, and if you're there, you can pay around $10 to climb the spire and get a great view of the city. Another popular thing to do in Christianshavn is to visit the famous free town Christiania. It has a super fascinating history of being sort of an independent hippie community within the city of Copenhagen. I certainly recommend you learn more about Christiania if you're interested, as I could easily fill a whole video just about this place. It's one of the most expensive cities in the world, but here's how you can save a bit of money and visit Copenhagen on a budget. You will most likely arrive in Copenhagen Airport, and the best and cheapest way to get from the airport to your hotel will of course depend on where exactly you're staying, but most of the time the best option will be to take the metro. You can use the site journeyplanner.dk to figure out the exact route and the stop where you need to get off. But from the airport, there's only one metro that you can get on, so you can't really go wrong. You can buy a ticket at the ticket machines that you'll find just on the way to the metro and the trains inside the airport. If you're following the signs, you really can't miss them, and there's usually always an employee to help you if you have trouble getting the right ticket. If you're going to around the city center, the price for a ticket will be around $4. Alternatively, you can download the app called DOT Tickets and purchase the tickets through the app. Accommodation is going to be the most expensive part of your stay in Copenhagen, so saving a bit of money here will go a long way in your budget. Airbnbs are usually as or even more expensive than hotels in Copenhagen, so they're probably not ideal for a budget trip unless you're going several people, or unless you are renting a single room in someone's apartment. Then perhaps it could be worth it. So just to give you an idea, the price for like a standard hotel room in Copenhagen is going to be around $100 per night. And if you want like a nice hotel, it's going to be more around $200 per night. The only real way to go a lot cheaper than that would be to stay in a hostel, which you could do for around $20 to $30 per night. Doing something like couch surfing or house sitting would of course be the best way to do a real budget trip, but it's also not for everyone. By finding a good deal on a hotel or compromising and staying in a hostel, you could save quite a bit of money, but either way, be prepared to allocate a large chunk of your travel budget to the hotel in Copenhagen. But where to stay? Because of course location also matters in terms of what the price of your hotel is going to be. As a rule of thumb, the further away you go from the center of the city, it's going to get a little bit cheaper. But honestly, it won't get that much cheaper. In my opinion, you're better off staying pretty central so that you can walk or take the bike to most places, thus saving you quite a bit of money on taking the train every single day. So here are some of the areas that I would recommend you to stay in. You can of course stay in central Copenhagen. This is if you want to be right in the action, near to all the touristy things. And if you're staying here, you can pretty much walk everywhere. You could stay in the neighborhood of Frederiksberg. This is where I live, and it's a pretty cool area and not very touristy at all. And it's still pretty close to the center, either by metro or bike, depending on exactly where you'd be staying. It could take around half an hour or more to walk to the center. Then you got the neighborhoods of Nørrebro and Vesterbro. They're like pretty young and hip areas with a lot of cafes, a lot of events going on, and also a lot less touristy compared to the center. You could also stay in Amager, and this way you would be close to the airport and also the beach, but you're still on the metro line, so you'll have easy access to the rest of Copenhagen. So there's really no best place to stay in Copenhagen, in my opinion. Either of the options I've mentioned would be perfectly fine, and it's very easy and fast to go between all the areas and to all the touristy things you would want to see. And what about when to visit? So the summer months are the most expensive, but they're also the best time to visit because of the weather. July and August are peak season here in Copenhagen, as well that's when most people have their vacation time. I think May or September would be the perfect time to visit Copenhagen to optimize for both the weather situation and the cost as well, as prices would be slightly lower. Now, I travel quite a lot, and I prefer to travel away from Denmark when it's cold here, which is pretty much from October until May. It gets really cold, rainy, and well, just pretty dark as the sun rises late and sets very early. It's not that you can't have a great experience visiting in these colder months, but just be prepared for that, and that it will be a bit of a different experience compared to if you go in summer. As even though things like accommodation can be a bit cheaper in the winter months, you might end up spending more money on doing a lot of activities or eating, drinking coffee, as a lot of the free things to do in Copenhagen are outside. And if it's very cold and rainy, you probably don't want to be outside all day long. About transportation and getting around the city. So as I mentioned, the metro system and train system are all very great, and it's very easy to get around no matter where you're staying. And by using the site or app journeyplanner.dk, you can easily figure out how to get where you want to go. But if you want to do things a bit more like the locals do, you should try to rent a bike and go around like that. It's a great way to see the city too. But Copenhagen is also a very walkable city, so when you are in the center, you can pretty much walk around to all the cool spots, and just walking around and getting a bit lost around the city is probably my best tip for tourists coming here. If you are going to be staying a bit away from the city center, and you know you'll be taking the metro quite a lot, you can look into getting a city pass, which gives you free transportation for 24 to 120 hours. So there's two passes, the small and the large. The small one basically includes the center of Copenhagen and most places you'll be visiting, and also until the airport. And the large one is basically if you want to go beyond that, so out to the suburbs and beyond. It does get a little bit expensive, but the quick math is if you're going to be doing something like 4 trips or more per day, then it can be worth looking into getting one of these passes and then save some money that way. Now, if you're going to be staying more than just a few days, you can look into getting one of these, a Reisekort. It essentially just makes every trip you take a little less expensive when you're using this card. And this is what a lot of us locals use here in Copenhagen. The card itself costs like $10 to make, and you can get it done at Copenhagen Central Station or even at some particular machines around each station. So perhaps look into this if you're going to be staying maybe a week or more. But again, if you're really going the budget route and trying to spend just as little as possible, the best option is just to walk everywhere. Stay somewhere quite central and walk. Other than the city pass and the Reisekort and the regular ticket, you could also look into getting a Copenhagen card, which we'll talk about now. Copenhagen Card includes entrance to a lot of different attractions, activities, museums, and so on. And one version can also include free transportation as well. You can get access to places like Tivoli, a canal tour, and a whole bunch of different museums and castles, and even the zoo. But it can also get really expensive. I'll throw up the price card here as it depends on how many days you want it and I guess which version you want as well. But it boils down to this: if you are already planning to visit a lot of these attractions that are included in the card, it can really be worth it and could save you a lot of money to buy the Copenhagen card. But if you're only planning to visit a few or you're not really sure yet, it might not be worth it. Now, I haven't done the exact math on this, as it will also depend on which of the places you would like to visit, as they all have different entrance fees, but you do need to go to quite a few places to make it worth it. I personally think that the biggest problem with this Copenhagen card and, well, similar cards that exist in many major cities is, let's say you get the 48-hour pass. Then in these next 48 hours, you have to cram in as many of these attractions, museums, you just have to put them in back to back just to make the card actually worth it. So you need to check out what's included and what's not included and what you would like to do. For example, the card will give you a free entrance to Tivoli, but if you want to try the rides, you have to pay for that on top as well. And a Tivoli ride pass costs like $35 US. The website to take a look at all of this, I think, is just copenhagencard.com. And here you can check out all of the things and if it includes the things that you want to do or not. Again, if you're really on a budget, skip the Copenhagen card, walk a lot and do a lot of the free activities, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. Eating out in Copenhagen can get really expensive really fast. If you want to eat on a budget, cook yourself. Of course, this might not always be possible. Most budget hotels don't really come with a kitchen. But if you're staying in a hostel, there's usually going to be like a communal kitchen that you can use. So besides cooking yourself, here's what you can do to save a bit of money on food. Go to some supermarkets and buy their pre-made sandwiches, salads, or something similar. Places like 7-Eleven also has some small meals for okay prices. In Denmark, we really eat a lot of bread. So another thing you could do is buy a pack of good rugbrød, rye bread. Get some butter and some things to go on top, like cheese or salami. You could probably borrow a knife and maybe a plate in your hotel. And then just buy some fruit or other things you can eat on the go, and then you're all set. Now, of course, this way you won't be eating like a king and trying all the delicacies and the Michelin restaurants we have here in Copenhagen. But I mean, you're traveling on a budget. Personally, what I like to do when I travel to very expensive cities is to eat cheaply like this most days and then just treat myself maybe once or twice to have a great meal of some local food. The one thing I suggest that you don't miss in Copenhagen is smørrebrød. It's really just the rye bread with something on top, which I just talked about, but a fancy version from a restaurant, and it's just so good. And let's not forget the pastries. Go to any bakery and buy whatever looks good, or ask the person behind the counter what they suggest you try. Visiting a place like Tivoli can get so expensive. As I mentioned, just the ride pass you need to try the rides is going to cost $35 US. And even things like museums can have pretty steep entrance fees. But luckily there are plenty of free things you can do here in Copenhagen. But a lot of those happen outside, which again is why I recommend going in the warmer months, as it is just way more comfortable going around the city all day. But there's also just a lot more going on around the city in these months. During the cold months, people really like to just stay inside and chill. I guess we should talk about tipping. I mean, it's always nice to know the norm wherever you are traveling. And in Denmark, we don't really tip at all. You can do it, of course, if you want to, but it is not expected. Generally, waiters are paid a fair enough wage, so they don't really rely on tips for their salary. And usually how it works is the whole staff will pile together all the tips at the end of the night and then share it evenly. So if you had a great experience with one person, your tip won't fully go to that person. Oh, and tips are also taxable here in Denmark, so 40% of your tip will actually go to the Danish government, so thank you. And since you don't really need to tip, you really don't need to take out cash at all. Everywhere you go, they will accept your credit card. You can pay with your phone, Apple Pay, whatever you use. There are very few scenarios where you actually need cash. But if you really want to or really need to, then look for like a regular bank's ATM and not these like generic ATM stations, as they usually have a bit of a higher fee when taking out cash. And for good measure, our currency here is the Danish kroner, and $1 is equal to around 7 kroners. But okay, let's talk about the best time to visit Copenhagen. The weather in Denmark is notoriously bad, cold, grey and rainy. So if you want to have the best chances of nice weather, go somewhere between May and September. You're still left at the mercy of the weather gods though, and you can never really know what to expect. As an example, this year we had an incredibly hot June with 20 to 25 degrees and fully blue skies pretty much the whole month. And that was followed by one of the wettest months ever in July, and it was basically raining every single day. Another great reason to visit in those months is that the city just feels a lot more alive. As good weather and sunny days are quite rare, us Danes really go all in when they are here. So we use the city a lot and go out and hang out outside all the time, and that just really gives a good vibe and feel to the whole city. I mean, right now it is perfectly sunny outside. A beautiful hot day today, and yesterday it was raining like crazy. But as we usually say here, there's no such thing as bad weather, just poor choice of clothing. I often hear from people who visit during like fall or winter that the city feels a little bit lifeless or boring, and that the people that they meet are a little bit cold. And that's probably true. I mean, winter depression is a real thing here, and during the winter months we really just want to stay inside and watch a movie and hang out with friends and family. And I guess we're just a little bit more grumpy. July and the first weeks of August are peak season here, as that's usually when most people have their vacation, so it will be the most busy and the most expensive. But this is also probably the time where you will have the best chances for nice weather. If you go in like fall or winter or early spring, I can almost guarantee you that it will be cold, grey and rainy. And during those winter months, the sun rises very late and it sets really early, around like 4 or 5 p.m. So it just feels dark all the time. Put that in contrast to the summer months where the sun rises super early and sets like late at night at 10 p.m. Those late sunsets are really special here in Copenhagen. But December can be quite nice though if you're into the whole Christmas vibe and Christmas markets and decoration and all that. But summertime really is the winner here, and if you're flexible with your dates, going in June or perhaps late August would be my recommendation for the best time to go. Getting to the city from the airport is super easy, pretty much no matter where you're staying. In most cases you'll be taking the metro, and that will take you just about 20 minutes to get from the airport to the city center. It should also be quite easy to figure out, and if you have any problems, there are usually like some employees there who you can ask any questions you might have. And when you are in the city, the metro is great for getting around, especially if you're going a little bit longer distances. The metro system in general is quite easy to figure out with the lines and where to go, and you can use the website journeyplanner.dk to see which train to get on and when it leaves and so on. The only thing that's a bit weird is the ticketing system, as it's like based on zones depending on where you are going from and to. But if you're just staying around Copenhagen, it usually isn't an issue, as that will always be within the same zone. But you can of course also do a bit more like the locals do and rent a bicycle. It's definitely the best way to get around and see the city. If you're just taking the metro to get around from one attraction to the next attraction, you're really missing out. Biking and even just walking a lot is really how I recommend many of you should get around when you're in Copenhagen. But if you want to rent a bicycle here, it's pretty important that you just read up a little bit about the rules and laws about how to actually drive a bicycle here. Us locals are pretty crazy in the bike lanes, especially going to and from work, just going full speed and expecting you to follow the rules and drive how you should. And I mean, it can get kind of dangerous if you don't follow the rules, as that can lead to accidents. So a quick Google search here will give you all the information you need. And it's really quite simple, just important not to ignore. And for an even greater experience here in Copenhagen, you can take your bicycle outside the city center. Visit the neighborhoods of Nørrebro, Østerbro, Vesterbro and Frederiksberg. There's a ton of things to do here, but perhaps less of the famous tourist attractions. But that also means that you'll have a lot fewer other tourists around and have a more calm and nice experience, I guess. What can a regular person expect to spend living here in Copenhagen? Well, you're in luck. My name is Adam and I like to travel and make videos. And today I will share just how much my girlfriend Sally and I spent a month living here in Copenhagen. We've been living here in Copenhagen for many years, and we've been living here while we were studying, while we had regular jobs, and now as we run our own businesses. We don't make a ton of money or have a huge trust fund or anything, so I will also be sharing everything we do to keep our expenses as low as possible. Oh, and all the expenses that I mention here are shared between, well, the two of us. But let's just start off big with accommodation. And this is definitely going to be the biggest expense. I mean, rents in Copenhagen can be pretty crazy. You can get some government housing or student housing, and there are some great deals here and there, but they are few and far between, and they can be very hard to get a hold of. When I first moved to Copenhagen, and I guess that wasn't actually in Copenhagen, but just slightly outside Copenhagen, I rented a room and paid 5,500 Danish kroner per month for that room, and I shared the apartment with two of my friends. And I think that's pretty normal for renting a single room in an apartment, of course depending on the size, the apartment itself and the location. But a few years ago, when Sally and I had our normal jobs, we actually bought this apartment here, which we paid almost 3 million Danish kroner for. So instead of paying rent, we pay for loans and maintenance and all that good stuff. So what we pay per month to stay in this apartment, and that's including paying off our loans and utilities and everything, is just about 15,000 kroner per month. And this apartment is, I think, 61 square meters with one bedroom. And if we were to rent a similar apartment in a similar location, maybe we could pay a bit less than we are paying now. So maybe around 12,000 we could probably find something. And if you're looking to rent an apartment with a few bedrooms, you can easily start looking at paying 15 to 25,000 kroner per month. But of course that really depends on the apartment itself and especially the location. So the further away from the city you get, the more affordable it gets. But Sally actually just got home, so I want to ask her why she likes living in Copenhagen and if she thinks it's worth paying this much for our apartment.
So we pay like around 15,000 Danish kroner to be staying in this apartment. And if we would be paying rent, it would be, I guess, more or less the same. Like for you, is that worth it to be staying here in Copenhagen?
I think so, yeah, because we are an urban couple, and we like the atmosphere and the whole Copenhagen vibe, and like being in the center where something like happens, and we're close to all of the cafes, theaters. The metro system is so good in Copenhagen. Like we can be anywhere like so fast. It's so good. So yeah, I would say that.
If you could live in any city Would it be Copenhagen or somewhere else?
I think it would be right here in Frederiksberg in Copenhagen. But I mean, I can't say that for sure because I haven't lived anywhere else permanently.
Thank you.
All right, let's get back to it and talk about transportation. Look, we bike almost everywhere. If we have to go a bit far, we might take the train or the metro, but for the most part, we take our bike everywhere, or even just walk. I mean, it's great that Copenhagen is not a huge city, so it's pretty easy to get around and to get where you want just in 10-20 minutes on your bike. And of course, the city itself is very bike friendly, and you'll see a lot of people biking around when you visit Copenhagen. So I think we spend about 200 kroner per month on transportations when we take the train or the metro, and that's about it. Of course, you do need to actually own a bike. I think the ones we have now, we both got as birthday presents, and the bike I had before that, I purchased for like 1,500 Danish kroner. Living in Copenhagen is really cool. I mean, you got all these amazing restaurants, cafes, and bar just around the corner. But the truth is, we never eat out. This is one of those areas where we choose to save a lot of money, as it is just really expensive eating out here in Copenhagen. So we always just cook our own food at home. So all of last year we were actually traveling around the world, but before that we would be spending around 2,000 to 3,000 Danish kroner per month on groceries and all of the household supplies we need. But after we came back home recently, we can really start to feel that inflation that everyone here in Europe has been talking so much about. Especially food and groceries has gone up in price a lot. I mean, I think we buy worse quality food and eat cheaper dishes usually, but now we spend more like 3,000 to 4,000 Danish kroner per month buying groceries and all of the household supplies we need. We also have a gym membership, and I think we pay around 300 Danish kroner for the both of us. All right, then we got like clothing, shoes, makeup products, and everything in that category. This is another area where we really try to save as much money as possible and just buy as little as possible and buy only what we need. So we try to, make use of what we got and maybe buy some secondhand. And I think it's probably Sally who spends the most here, but we will probably spend just about 1,000 kroner per month if we divide it out over the year. Then we got a lot of like smaller expenses like phone plan, internet, insurance, and these kind of things. And if we add all of those up, it comes out to just about 1,000 Danish kroner per month. So in total, we spent just about 20 to 22,000 Danish kroner per month living here in Copenhagen. And just about 75% of that is just for the apartment alone. Now, it is a pretty cool little apartment, but especially the location is very, very nice. We really try to keep our other expenses as low as possible so that we're able to live here and so that we can spend the rest of our money traveling as much as possible. We actually recently just came back to our apartment here in Copenhagen after living as digital nomads for more than a year. And you can watch this video right here if you want to hear about why we stopped living this seemingly glamorous lifestyle as digital nomads living in Bali, Italy, Thailand. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.